Thank you for tuning in to my review of Melabeth the Vampire by E.B. Hood. The author had found me on YouTube or Goodreads and requested that I do a review of one of his books. So he sent me the first one in the series, and I read it, and I'm going to review it now. I have to say that I really thought this was a cool story. I kind of really got into it. I was surprised because a lot of the times when you get an independent book by an independent author, they usually don't tend to be very good. So I was surprised. It was a decent story. It's a story about a 15-year-old girl who she is raped and murdered and then wakes up to find herself a vampire, and she's seeking revenge on her killers. So, I mean, yes, that sounds like an awesome story. She eventually runs into this guy who she falls in love with. I didn't really get the impression that she fell in love with him. I felt that it was more of an infatuation, like teens are tend to get involved and be infatuated and not really true love. I thought it was a really interesting story. I liked the characters. The character of Melabeth. I mean, at first when she was first introduced in the story, I was like, I really didn't like the way it was kind of like, I don't know if it was written like the fragmented paragraphs, if it was written that way because she was remembering it and she had a hard time remembering, but that really kind of bugged me. Like there were so many like spaces, like too many little paragraphs, like a few sentences would be a paragraph or whatnot, and I think maybe the author was trying to imply she was slowly remembering that. But one of the problems I did have with the story was, I guess she died in 1975, and she had awoken many years later, and the kind of vampire she is like, I would call a true blood vampire, where you drink vampire blood to become a vampire, and then you die from the vampire blood, like consuming too much or whatnot, and then if you wake up, you're a vampire, and if you don't, you're just dead. But I didn't understand, and it was never explained why she died in 1975, but she woke up many years later. Never. I don't know, is this something the author plans on revealing later in the next book or the book following that? I really don't know, and that kind of bothered me about the story. It was never really explained, but it was kind of like thrown around a couple times because she was strong, even though she was a newly born vampire because she had just risen or whatnot, but she had powers of, you know, a vampire who should have been alive for so many years or whatnot. So that was kind of one of the things I had an issue with. I thought it was cool that she sought out a vampire family to help train her on how to be a vampire. That made the story really interesting. It was cool reading about the backstories for those characters, and there were some strange little twists that I thought were really a plus, and who the leader of that little coven was. And I thought it was interesting about the witches and the secret society of supernaturals. So it was a very fascinating read. I really did enjoy reading this. I was thinking when I got towards the end, I kept thinking, I'm like, oh my god, there's only a few pages left. It's going to end on a sour note. I kept thinking this, but I was actually surprised. It had a decent ending, a pretty good ending that would lead into another book. Now I'm going to tell you why I gave it a 3-star rating, because, I mean, you guys are hearing this and you're probably thinking, oh man, this sounds like a 4 or 5-star book. The reasons why I gave it a 3-star rating are as follows. At the beginning of the book, before you even get to the story, there's an author biography, like, thrown in to the very front of the book. I have never seen an author do that in the front of the book. It's always in the back, like after you read the story. If you want to know more about the author, you can read about them. I kind of thought this was kind of not cool, and in all honesty, I thought that whether the author intended this or not, it seemed like he was trying to garner, like, sympathy. The story was a really strong story. It really didn't need any sympathy from the reader for you to like the story. So please put the author bio in the back where it belongs, like every other book does. the story alone can survive without anybody having to know anything about the author. It was a good story. It was a story that'll uphold and stand up by itself. Another thing that I found issues with were the writing was really, really good. Besides, I kind of got, I don't know because I can't ask you this, but I think that the paragraph little spacing was because she was trying to remember things, because it wasn't like that the whole book. But the writing was good until you got to like the middle towards the end, and I noticed there's a lot of grammatical errors or like little like spelling things that were probably overlooked. They were spelled right, but the word context was just wrong. For instance, when it should have been she had fed, it was feed. And there were just so many of those, like towards the last few pages of the book, it was like it was rapidly finished and somebody didn't really read it and edit it correctly because there were a lot of them towards the end, a lot of those errors. So that's why I gave it a 3-star rating, just based on that. If that stuff was corrected, this would be a 4-star book, I would say. It was really good. I would recommend people to read this who like the True Blood series, or possibly if you liked Anne Rice, or even YA readers could probably read this and get something out of it. So that is my review of Melabeth the Vampire by E.B. Hood. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time. Later, guys.